The Science Notes podcast on OAR FM Dunedin, brought to you by the Division of Sciences at the University of Otago. I'm Dave McMorrin. Over the next half hour, I'll be chatting with a graduate science student about their research, their passion for science, and the things that fuel their creativity. Well, hello there, and welcome again to another episode of Science Notes. My name's Dave McMorrin, and this time our guest is Hanna Ravn. Only it's not really Raven. We've just been talking about this. How do we say your last name?
It's Ravn.
Right.
Yeah.
So
but it means raven.
It means raven.
Yeah.
There you are. And it's from which language?
That's that family spans across Scandinavia. So
right.
Denmark, Norway, Sweden.
But you're from Denmark originally.
Yeah, Denmark. Spent a lot of time in Norway as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's much more to Hanna's name than I had to worry about. But Hanna, it is. Hanna is doing a master's in marine science at Otago University, and she's going to talk to us a bit about that this time. But before we get into that, how is it that you've ended up doing this?
It's a kind of a twirly story, but I'll try to keep it as short as I can. But I was really lucky to kind of start working along biologists from I was just 14 years old.
Right.
And actually worked as a zookeeper for a long time.
Oh, nice.
And then started my undergraduate in
This was all in Denmark?
This was in Denmark, yeah. So a lot of wildlife interactions with a lot of different, botany, ecology, all of that. And then started my undergrad when I was in my 20s, thought maybe I should try some academia.
Yep.
And then came here for when I was doing some postgrad and just kind of fell in love with the nature first and then fell in love with the people. And then decided to stay. So, been here for about 8 years and worked with sea lions just as long.
So, you did a degree in zoology? Your undergrad?
Bioscience.
In bioscience.
Yeah, so it kind of spans across all of the fields in one,
So not something we strictly do here, but that's all right.
A little bit different.
And so then you came out here because you were interested in the sea lions or because you were just wanting a change?
Yeah, I actually did the second one, wanting a change, kind of wanting to go somewhere else and learn from abroad as well. And it's the same story. You come here, I think a lot of people have it. You're supposed to just be here for a few months and then you look years down the road and you're still here. So,
we've had a few people on the show like that. Don't necessarily come for the weather, although it's been very nice this week.
It's been really been great.
But certainly if you are interested into wildlife, it's a good place to be.
Definitely.
Because there's lots of stuff around and you don't have to go very far to find lots of other things as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful here.
So sea lions.
Yeah.
This is your creature of choice. Why sea lions? And do they have them in Denmark?
No, we don't have them in Denmark. We have seals, harbor seals and grey seals, and lucky to have grown up along them. So, but sea lion is definitely way, way different. And the pakake here, what makes it so interesting is that it's one of the few megafauna species that are actually increasing, in at least in the subpopulation that we have around here. So it's in many ways a successful, happy story. And I think after I had worked with quite a few species that didn't have happy stories, that made me kind of fall in love with that. Yeah.
Are the sea lions that we find around Dunedin, are they native to New Zealand?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, so they've been here for, a long time. A long time. And the ones that are here on the mainland, they've kind of come, the majority of them that's around Otago have come from this one descendant mum that came and gave birth to a pup in the early 90s.
Right.
And so the ones that we look at on the shore now, a lot of them actually has the whakapapa that kind of goes back to her. So it's some would say the rarest sea lion species in the world, but it's definitely in top 2.
And I suppose because New Zealand's renowned for having lots of birds, but very few native mammals.
Yes.
And then people go, but bats.
Yes.
But in some ways, the sea lions are another one.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But the marine mammals are often not counted
no,
when people talk about
they're kind of glorified fish or something.
Exactly. But the cool thing about the pakake is that the sea lion, is that they are on land as well. I mean, they're part terrestrial. So they're definitely, you could say they're land-based too, as much as sea-based. So.
And as we were just saying before, just recently in Dunedin, there's been some that have been taking up residence in people's backyards out in South Dunedin and stuff. And
yeah, absolutely. And go 60 kilometres inland. So they're
when they want to.
Yeah.
So what then is your particular tack in your research on the sea lions?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of both what would be seen as conventional science, where we do some prey analysis. Go out and I do something as fancy as collecting poo and vomit, basically, which is a great kind of non-invasive method of looking at their diet. You know, we don't have to pump the stomachs or anything like that. That used to be done in the olden days. And then we're also trying to then really make sure that this research is happening with communities and alongside communities. So the last year we've been collecting these samples and kind of washing and sterilizing them. And then the next step is talking to people about their interactions with sea lions. So surveying the general public around their encounters, their feelings and experiences that they've had with sea lions. And then once that's been done, we're then going to try and combine those two components where there's specific coastal groups like divers, spearfishers, hopefully boaters, you know, kind of people that work and live along the coastline, get them in and then look at the results of the diet and the community survey and talk about what needs to be done in the future to kind of mitigate a little bit of some of the stuff that we're seeing right now that we don't want in the future.
Yeah. So let's talk about the diet thing initially and the collecting of the poo and the vomit. I'm reminded of one of the shows we did very, very early on, goodness, probably 13 years ago, where someone was doing exactly the same thing with frogs out in the forest, and she had to go around and put frogs in Ziploc bags and then collect their poo the next morning. A little bit easier for you.
In some ways, yeah.
and you sent through some photos, some quite impressive amounts of vomit from a seal.
Yep.
Is this something that they normally do?
Oh, absolutely. It's really, really normal.
So they're like cats?
Yes. And I would say maybe
or like my cat anyway.
Yeah. It depends how frequent your cat vomits. I would say with the cats I've had, sea lions definitely vomit more.
Right.
Yes, and it's really cool what we're seeing and what's been seen in the past research as well. I mean, this is all done alongside people that have been doing this kind of stuff for 40 plus years. So I'm definitely not the expert. They are, and they're trying to train me as best as they can. But what we're seeing in this is that in the vomit, we're seeing some types of prey that we're not seeing in the scat or the poo.
Right.
So you really need both of those two things to kind of get a more comprehensive look at what they're eating. So
the things that are in the vomit but not in the scat are things which the seals eaten but actually didn't really want to. It's not actually...
Oh, no, it's probably more down to the fact that they can't digest it.
Right. Okay.
So a really good example is octopus. So, they eat squid and octopus. Because they're soft-bodied animals, they get easily digested and there's no hard bones that comes out at the end. But what does happen is that they vomit up the beaks. Right. Which are really sharp. So, it could be that the beaks are a threat to going through the digestive tracts. They could, leave scars in the intestine and stuff. So they vomit it up instead.
That's sensible.
Yeah.
And so then you can, so you go out with a bucket presumably, and you and a shovel, and you collect up all the vomit, and then you've got some sites around Otago Harbour that you're checking on, and so you've got specific communities of sea lions that you're following.
Yeah, and it's actually very much down to the communities in terms of people that will let me know where the sea lions are hauled out at the moment, because it kind of changes throughout the breeding season where they are. So it's a lot of people from Department of Conservation and a lot of communities around that lives like in Brighton and Smales and so on that will have been really good at kind of calling me up or sending me photos saying, I got a poo for you. And then I've been running out to them and grabbing it, yeah.
So the sea lions, are they all tagged, or you have a way of identifying them all?
Yes, yeah, exactly. All the ones that are born here on the mainland or around Otago are. Quite a few of them from Makiura are tagged as well. But when you go down to the main population in the subantarctic, it's only some of them that have been tagged.
Right.
So if, we sometimes have some show up here on our beaches that have no tags at all and no sign of having lost a tag. And so they're most likely pretty rural and would have swum hundreds of kilometers to get here.
So what are we learning then from collecting up all these samples?
Oh, I think it's too early to say definitive because we're still collecting and we're looking at it. But one thing, just, I like to play around with data. I'm also trying to train myself to actually do the full analysis at the end. And what kind of sticks out at the moment is that they're eating prey species that they weren't eating when this was done 15 years ago.
Right.
So there was a researcher, Amelie Aug, who 15 years ago did a study like this specifically on breeding females. And there's a fish species, kahawai, that at that point wasn't here.
Right.
So it wasn't in these waters. It was further up north.
Where it was warmer.
Exactly, where
and
it was
now
warmer.
It's warmer here.
Now it's here.
Yeah.
And this is actually now in the top 3 of species of fish that they're eating, which is a really high percentage of the fish that they're eating. So it does seem that they have ability to prey shift, which is really interesting because it also means, you can't just say then that if this species isn't here, then they aren't going to survive. We have to look into what in the future species will be here of the prey that they live on, or what could potentially substitute some of those as well. Yeah.
So it's a bit different. I might be wrong here, but I think the penguins that live around here have got the same issue in that the fish that they eat are all going south, but then the penguins are going with them.
Yeah, I think with the if it's specifically with the hoiho, the yellow-eyed penguin, it's I think it's also it's a multi-factor thing.
Yeah,
I'm not an expert in it, but with that there's many other things. But yeah, it's it's heartbreaking when there's species that disappear because it's prey and it's often also a food source for us as humans.
But I suppose it's a different response for the sea lions.
Yes, exactly.
It's rather than following the food that they are used to.
Yes.
They're staying and adapting and eating something new.
And yes, and trying to substitute the best that you can. And so far, I mean, what's really interesting with the ones here on Otago and Catlins and also Rakiura is that they seem to be so much more healthier, the sea lions that are up here compared to in the subantarctic. And the subs is some of the main fishing grounds that we've had. I mean, that's where trawling happens. And there's been some interesting, little bit gloomy developments in fish stocks around there.
Yeah.
And there's just been a lot of disease that seems to come through and wipe out entire breeding seasons of pups in that place. So yeah, it's kind of for some of us who work in this field, and I've heard this from people that have worked with them since they returned or the breeding returned to the mainland. This is kind of our backup population, and it's not even big enough to be a colony. But at least they're healthy up until this point, so that's really good.
So the numbers here, I think you said earlier, the numbers here are increasing.
Yes, so they are increasing.
I suppose if they started off with one and a pup, then obviously they're increasing.
Yeah.
So how many are there around the peninsula now?
So last year we had 31 pups born in one breeding season, which is awesome. That was the highest that we've had so far. This year we're really hoping, we're waiting for all the mums to kind of return and start doing the little crushing together, which have started.
Yeah.
There's some crushing sites that's happening right now, and we definitely have more than 20 pups, but we're hoping there is this magical number 35. If we have 35 pups or more in 5 years in a row, then it's declared a colony that's around Dunedin. So yeah, it would be nice if that could happen because hopefully that will also mean that there will be a bit more put into place in terms of protection of the colony as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the issues with sea lions is that they hang out on the beach and then they get harassed by dogs and stuff. So I suppose the more common they are, the more people will learn how to appropriately interact with them. Yeah,
definitely. And it's changed a lot in a few years. I mean, I remember just 6 years ago that most people were and it also was actually a lot of the times also dog walkers who were not happy having sea lions around, friends who were afraid of taking their kids out surfing because of sea lions. But there's a mentality shift that's really happened. And there's been talk about, was it lockdown? Was it the fact that people actually went every day to walk out on the beaches and around the harbor and actually got to see it more frequently as an everyday kind of life?
Yeah.
Is a really good question. Or is it just that people are appreciating more of local nature than just, BBC abroad documentaries?
I mean, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I kind of feel like as a Dunedin person, born and bred, Dunedin has an affinity for albatrosses and for the hoi-ho and for various different things. And maybe it's just an exercise in there getting to be enough of the sea lions that they also become part of that extended community that Dunedin has and cares about and recognises the value of for tourism and whatever else. But yeah, so the more there are, the better that might be.
Oh, definitely. And the main protection there is on sea lions now is communities being out there saying, hey, that mum belongs on our beach. Yeah. That pup is her pup. We will protect them.
Or in my neighbour's front yard, as it was for this one a few weeks ago.
Yes, exactly. So it couldn't, I mean, if that protection hasn't been there, the on-ground local protection, then it would look very different to the population.
Yeah. So part of your work then is, well, I suppose the research work is the going out and collecting samples and analysing the samples and counting bits of X squid and stuff. But then you you touched on this a bit, you do a lot of work with community groups and school groups and I think you said a kindy today.
Yes.
Little tiny kids.
Little kindergarten, yeah.
So what sorts of things are you doing with them? Are you taking them out to see the sea lions or?
Yeah, so I'm kind of, because I started kind of in a bit of this mahi with sea lions was through the New Zealand Sea Lion Trust. Years ago. So it's kind of become, with this research project, it's kind of become my whole life, both the volunteer free time and also the research and studies and work. But that's kind of great. I like it that way.
Yeah.
So the whole project was, really shaped around the conversations that had happened years before I enrolled in the Masters, and was just really lucky to through Coastal People's Southern Skies kind of, which is an amazing research core, I think it's called officially, where their work and everything that they kind of support, it has to be rooted in community. So the project was really shaped by all the people that I had met and worked with before the Masters started. And talking about what is needed, what you guys want to see. And one of the things that was coming out from a lot of these conversations was that there was a lot of anecdotal evidence of people's encounters and both the positive and negative kinds. There was a lot of anecdotal evidence around, dogs off lead and attacks and how people were kind of going around beaches. So this project, we're trying to kind of collate those anecdotes into something a bit more substantial. So by trying to collect people's experiences and feelings and connections to the coastline and the Pakake, there will be stuff to hand over to the Department of Conservation because they're working on a new action plan for sea lions at the moment. So we can hand over the results of that and say it's not just anecdotal anymore. Yeah. Here is a really widespread survey that, again, hasn't been done for about, I think it is nearly 15 years for that one. And the situation is very different with the population now. Yeah. So this is what people want. This is how people feel. This is what we need to work on in the future. Yeah. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. And so you're getting these stories and this impression of people's attitudes to them at all levels, right down to the wee kids and stuff as well.
Yeah. So with the wee kids, we're mostly kind of we would be searching for family members, parents that will kind of share some of the family stories. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, the kindergarten I was with this morning was with the New Zealand Sea Lion Trust, and we were out kind of chatting with them about, there's a couple of pups hanging out around St. Clair and St. Kilda at the moment. They had been seeing those, and they had been seeing the mums calling the pups and all of this. So the manager at the kindergarten had contacted me and asked, we were there last year, could we come again this year and just have a chat with them about sea lions and what they mean for the environment. And
cool.
Yeah, just
nice.
Really great. This definitely the hardest audience to kind of try and,
I've done a little bit with kids that small as well, and yes, keeping them focused.
Yes, yeah, but it was so great. They were amazing. Yeah,
cool. Time is running down. So you're doing a 1-year master's.
2 years part-time.
2 years part-time, right. So that's finishes this year?
No, it will probably finish sometime next year.
Okay.
Because I'm also getting hitched this year.
Oh, well,
so
there you
I
go.
will be taking a little bit of time off. Yeah.
No, fair enough. What then after that? More formal study or more?
It's a really good
just
question.
Hanging out with them?
At this point, I have no idea. We'll see what happens. I could see myself both continuing academia or going back to professionally working, teaching. I don't know. Whatever comes up. It's kind of how I've always, I think, done things. And I've been really good at doing things the opposite order, so working professionally and then getting the degree that I need to do those things. So maybe be something completely different next.
It's not always the wrong way around in my experience.
Yeah, no, that's true.
By the time you come to it, you know it's what you want to do rather than just stumbling into it through lack of imagination, which is what I did. So.
Yeah, and I definitely, exactly. And it's one thing that I, wanted to do this. We were talking about should it be a master's or a PhD, but it had been so long since I had last done that kind of research, like a master's research project. And so I wasn't sure how I was gonna fare. But what is cool is that I've loved it. And for me, this project is, yes, I'm writing a thesis, but it's just so much built on everyone else that's involved in this project and everyone else's knowledge and what they want. And I think that's so cool.
Cool.
So big thanks to all those people.
and big thanks to you for coming along and talking to us today about what you've been up to. And thank you everyone out there for listening. We will finish with a piece of music that Hanna's brought along.
Yes.
Which is...
So you can't really be a Scandinavian and work in conservation without knowing the song. It's called The Seed by Norwegian Aurora. It's very much about protecting nature. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thanks everyone for listening.
Just like the sea.
You've been listening to the Science Notes podcast, brought to you by the Division of Sciences at the University of Otago. To listen again, or to find other episodes in this series, go to Otago Access Radio's website, oar.org.nz, or to your favourite podcast platform.